Amazon Game Studios are making yet another MMO. That's right, they're working on yet another game, despite being the only publisher to unrelease a major game in recent times, despite having delayed their MMO New World multiple times, now up to a year delayed, and despite cancelling other projects before they ever saw the light of day. My name is Hollow, and welcome back to a new Rage Gaming video. Today we're going to talk about this yet another MMO Amazon are working on, and I'm seeing in regards to this really funny comments in which if they just keep trying to make new games and throw stuff at the wall, maybe something will eventually work, right? Thing is, they've got the money to do it, and they're clearly trying. Before we get into it, I want to give thank you to Force, aka Force Gaming, for making the video that brought this to our attention. You should definitely check him out for any major gaming news and events. But since that, we've had an interesting development after the news broke, because as it turns out, they'd accidentally leaked what type of game this was. So, we're talking Amazon Game Studios again, the people who brought you the great hits of Breakaway, a multiplayer arena game with characters who use a small selection of abilities to fight against an enemy team, which didn't make it far enough through development for us to ever get a hands on and properly see, since they cancelled it while it was still in dev. It looked visually nice and there were some cool mechanics displayed on the teasers we saw, but you have to wonder, why'd they give that one up? Maybe it's because of Crucible, the third-person hero shooter that they were working on that spectacularly failed at launch, and like I said, it was the first game I've heard of in a long time to unrelease, especially so soon after its launch. They had plans to develop it properly and come back with a more fun and maybe finished game, because they'd sent it out way before it was ready. We actually had plans to get an early look at what they were working on after we were talking with them, and I was personally hopeful for the game and wanted to see what they were bringing back. They seemed optimistic from what we'd heard. But then they announced that the game dev is suddenly cancelled and they're closing the game altogether. Yikes. They also made a Grand Tour game, apparently. It was based on the TV series, The Grand Tour. It was basically a racing game, but set in episodes, and that reviewed, well, very poorly. Can't say I know much about it, though. But what I do know about is New World, the currently in-dev MMORPG that's been having a very awkward failed release. It attempted to release because it was meant to come out last August, but after being delayed multiple times already, they pulled the plug and delayed it for a full year to actually do some real development. So yeah, their track record is obviously bad, and they need to release some finished games. I mean, if they don't want to iron out the pretty bad rep they have right now for releasing unfinished games or cancelling games, they need to make some changes. MMOs are massive undertakings, costing an insane amount of money to create and run, and the time they take to actually develop can be upwards of 5 years at least. We did recently get a brief look at the game for a preview event, not a beta, but a preview event in August to make up for the multiple delay situation. That was met with mixed response. Some players appreciating the world, the lore, the core mechanics, and what they're trying to do, while others found a lot of the aspects of the game clunky and very restricted, somewhat unfinished towards endgame. A good example of that would be the weapon system, which is great in concept, but falls flat on its potential because it just feels bad when they limit you so much on the ability cooldowns and the weapon swapping. Maybe the stun system in PvP, where people were just being stun locked to dead easily. Personally, I think parts of the game that were good were in fact great. The feeling of the world was something special, and it's hard to achieve that. The problems that the game did have, though yeah, various, are things that I think need tuning and refining rather than, say, being inherently broken. So I actually still think New World has a good shot, and because they've made the decision to delay it for a full year, maybe that'll give them the real time they need to get it together. I mean, on paper, there's a lot of good. There's the cool combat system based on the Souls series, there's that faction-based PvP, there's the many different crazy progression systems for, say, your weapon, professions, reputations, and so on, and of course that world and the story inside of it. But on the other hand, yeah, the list of issues with the game is reasonably long, and at a certain point it just seemed unfinished and repetitive. Overall, there's still a lot going for the game, so I wish them good luck, and hopefully with this delay they'll put everything into it and it'll work out well. The problem is the history of Amazon Game Studios is pretty bad, and New World is all we're really looking at lately for them. So I must say, I was shocked to hear they're working on a new MMO, another separate MMO that's actually this time sci-fi based in contrast to the colonial American styled New World. Before you lose your your mind and go write an angry comment about New World on the forums that they should be focusing on that game, bear in mind Amazon's a big company and they have a lot more than one group working on their games. Apparently, this sci-fi MMO is being led by John Smedley, who is now running the San Diego studio for Amazon Games. Smedley has a pretty good history with MMOs, having worked on both PlanetSide 2, a massive free-faction futuristic shooter game that I absolutely loved, with incredible vehicles in that whole system and like piloting in the air with the ships. That was a gem of a game. But also DC Universe Online, the DC hero or villain sim in which you create your own hero or villain and run chaos through places like Metropolis or Gotham, with many big DC names being part of the main story. I, again, absolutely loved that game, which released almost 10 years ago already, Jesus. But that was one of the first major MMOs that I was aware of on console too, since it's on PlayStation, Xbox, and even lately on the Switch. These two games stood out in the MMO space for being unique and unusual. I mean, PlanetSide 2 was nuts. But he also has a long history with EverQuest on top. So I do think I can trust someone like Smedley to know what he's doing. Actually, in hindsight, I can trust the Crucible devs because the game concept and the plans for it were great. It's just the execution wasn't. And to be honest, I don't know if I can blame the Crucible team directly for that. I'm of the opinion that Amazon, as a publisher, forced Crucible out before it was ready, and then they cancelled it before it even had its redemption chance. I think New World wasn't nearly ready, and again, someone forced the dev team to release that on a schedule they obviously couldn't match. We have good talent and good ideas here, and lots of money to fund it, but clearly, after the history of this studio, that doesn't just mean success. So what do we know about this next game, this sci-fi MMO? Well, apparently it's been a secret project they've been working on since around 2017, meaning it's on the way to between 3 and 4 years of dev time. On average, MMOs take around 5 or more years to develop, so we might actually be hearing news on this one really soon. Maybe some real information or like a teaser or trailer. And then not long after that, potential alpha or closed betas. Either way, I do think it's something we'll hear about soon, even if it's, say, 2 years away from full release. The reason we heard about this game in the first place was due to John Smedley himself tweeting out that they're working on an unannounced game, with lots of job openings as they're looking to hire more people for that team. Through that link, we can see the different job listings and what they're for, but what we're interested in is the descriptions for the different multiple jobs that refer to what they're working on, a sci-fi MMO. For example, the senior game designer position is most interesting because it was edited. Originally, it stated that this designer position will be working on game systems that drive exciting and dynamic gameplay for a brand new multiplayer sci-fi world, which was newly reworded to unannounced massively multiplayer game, not mentioning that sci-fi world anymore. That confirms to me that the setting is probably sci-fi, and hey, it's an MMO because they literally said that. Someone probably shouldn't have stated the sci-fi bit for some reason. Maybe they're not ready to tell us that, considering how they've changed the wording now. Obviously, we know more about this game right now than maybe we're meant to currently. But what's great to hear, if we look at the graphics engineer position, is how they mention that they'll be working with people who worked on Overwatch, World of Warcraft, EverQuest, Evolve, Gears of War, and even God of War. It seems like they've got good people behind the team, it's just that was never enough before. In regards to what type of game this could be, other than say, hey, a sci-fi setting that's also an MMO, we did see this tweet from Smedley during the initial stages of this game's development, where he tweeted a question about PC shooter games, asking which game had the best gunplay, since hey, he's working on something for a new game. So yeah, this very well could be a sci-fi shooter MMO, which sounds cool to me, and kind of like PlanetSide, a bit of a different style for MMOs compared to your more generic fantasy style, such as New World. We don't have a huge amount of sci-fi shooter MMOs out there right now, and it'd be cool to see a genuine MMO that's in that style. Things like Destiny 2 are obviously, yeah, an MMO, but are more separated and instanced in smaller groups and smaller numbers, compared to, say, thousands of people running around all at once like in your usual MMO. Whatever the case, that's pretty much everything we got for it. I think we'll hear details about this one soon, and I'm looking forward to that whenever that is. But my question is, are you? What's your reaction to hearing that they're working on yet another game? Again, as I said, remember that these are different teams, different studios working on different games. They're all being published by the massive publisher that is Amazon. They're all completely different teams working on them. Relentless Games, the ones behind Crucible, are a totally different studio and team working under Amazon compared to, say, Smedley and his team based in San Diego. This is just another another case of Amazon revealing yet another thing they put in motion years ago. And frankly, at this point, the upcoming MMO scene is dry as hell. As a genre, we've got powerhouses that already exist and have for years, but far and few between when it comes to upcoming new Western MMOs. So I'm happy to hear news that there's another in the works in a different genre to the usual, and with someone like Smedley probably trying something a bit different on top, that's good to know. And I'll kind of take any new MMO news at this point because, you know, there ain't much going on. Question is, can Amazon make a functional game before they attempt to release it? Time will tell, but God, I hope they've learned their lesson that, hey, maybe when a game is done, that's when you release it. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on this one in the comments. I'm actually quite interested to see what you guys make of this. Until next time, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and I'll see you in the next video.